A few months ago, you added a hard cap for the daily achievement points, and in a few days, some people are going to hit that cap. What is the reasoning behind the cap, and will you ever change it?
Yeah, so actually, when we changed that, there was one player in the world who was very close to hitting cap already within a few days of when we made that change. Part of the reason that we made that change is that when new people come into the game and you have this ability to gain achievement points every day repeatably, it creates a very difficult situation for new people coming in and saying, oh, hey, I want to also try to compete. And we want it to both give an opportunity for people who have been playing the game to be ahead on those leaderboards, and also give new people coming into the game a chance to say, hey, this is still attainable for me. That's actually a smaller side of the reason that we did it. I think the larger reason is that we didn't want to make doing your dailies a task that is required. There are things that are intended to be, hey, as part of playing the game, you kind of accomplish these things just when you log in and you have a normal play session, and there are some rewards for doing that. And we had a lot of feedback, even feedback from people that were up in the top end of the leaderboards, that they felt like they were compelled or that they couldn't miss a single day, and they had to go in and play dailies over and over again. And that's not really what Guild Wars 2 is. We want it to be a game where you can go in and you can play the game that you want to play and engage with it the way that you want to. And so capping those was the decision that we made. It's possible that we would extend that in the future, but at the moment we felt like, hey, there's definitely value to going in and playing the dailies, but we don't want to force people to go in and feel like, oh man, I have to go and do these 10 dailies, and instead have it be something that's fun and it's just part of your regular play experience.
Well, you made some adjustments to the field of view in game. Some people are wondering if you're ever going to give them more freedom to change it with a slider.
So we have the ability to kind of override your camera during boss fights and provide you with a much broader view, or let you zoom out further. And we try to be judicious with when we apply that and say, hey, this is content where you really need to have this kind of broad perspective. There's always a tension there because we spend a lot of time and we're very proud of the art that we do, and we have a fantastic art team, and they're spending a lot of time making things look really, really good up close. And so that's part of the tension that you see, that we want you to be immersed in the world and see all of the hard work that they're doing. I think we're always experimenting with different things. In the dev client, we have different ways of tweaking the camera, and it's something that we're aware of, and we always are thinking about how do we improve the camera, how do we give players more control while still kind of having this space where you can see how pretty Guild Wars 2 is. And so it's a balance. I wouldn't rule anything out, but beyond saying that we're looking into camera in general, we don't have anything specific that we could announce that we're doing with camera.
Similarly, some people are wondering what your stance is about adding a first-person view.
I think it falls into the same realm of, that's not something that we would rule out. We do play around a lot with different camera views and different controls, and I think even in some of the betas you've seen, like some people have found, oh man, there's like kind of an eagle eye view or a top-down camera view. It's something that we explore and we think about how would this work in the game and what would it make the game feel like and what does it add for players. But off the record, there's nothing that we can say at this time.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would say is that the first-person mode, which we've had ways to kind of toggle in and out of it on our dev client before, the biggest reason to stay away from it is that the sense of direction in combat is really important in our game, as well as positioning. Positioning is really important. So when you go into that first-person mode, you really completely lose understanding of anything that's going on behind you, which can make our combat really difficult to understand and very just difficult to play. There are some PvE scenarios where probably it wouldn't be a big deal, but certainly in PvE or in PvP and World versus World, it becomes very, very difficult to actually understand what's going on in combat, which means that it really handicaps you as a player at that point. It makes it difficult to know what's going on. And, for that reason, it's something where we probably won't be doing much work with because we really have done a lot of work and we continue to do work to make combat as readable and understandable as possible. And like I said, directionality and positionality are really important in our combat space, so being able to see all of that playable space is really valuable.
During your first year, you've spoken about precursor crafting. Can you give any updates about that? And will we be seeing something like this during the upcoming period?
So we don't really have anything to announce at this time. It is absolutely something that we are, fully aware of, and it's a part of the system that we want to be making improvements upon. So it's something that we've been putting a lot of thought into and been kind of trying to figure out what the best solution to that problem is. But we don't have anything that we can say right now about changes to the precursor system or the legendary system at all. But like I said, it's definitely something that's on our radar and something we hope to be making improvements to and to have more to talk about sometime soon.
Some folks are really bummed that their parents took away the Super Adventure Box. Is there anything you can tell them to cheer them up before going back to school?
You wanna deliver the news?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about living world and living story, you can see that we're moving much more towards a focused narrative that's focused on your relationship with Bram and Rox and some of the other characters that we've introduced. And that means that there's less space to do something where you kind of take a break and you say, and now for something completely different, which is what Super Adventure Box was. I think the other part of it is that we look very carefully at how much people played and how much people enjoyed different portions of content that we put out. And so that also weighs into the factor of, well, hey, what are we going to do, and when do we bring back things? How much time do we put into different festivals, Halloween and Winter's Day? And so Super Adventure Box has a ton of people that were really excited about it, and it also has that difficulty of it is something that is very different from Guild Wars 2 in a lot of ways, and it doesn't easily fit into the narrative structure of Living World. And so I think it's very unlikely that you would see it as part of a Living World season release. As to whether or not we would do something else with it, or it would come back in some other form, I can't really say. I don't know how likely that is, and that's really all I can say about it. We know that there are a ton of people that really enjoyed it, and we had a lot of fun playing portions of it, but it's difficult to fit in within the narrative structure that we have now, and I think that makes it very much less likely that it will appear in a Living World season going forward.
But will it come back after the current season?
We can't really comment that much about what our long-term plans are for the game, and so it's a similar answer if you asked me what was going to happen in the upcoming episodes of Season 2. Like, I really can't say. But it is very much a different game in a lot of ways than Guild Wars 2, a game within a game. And we're trying to focus on, we have game modes already in World v. World and PvP and PvE. And fractals. There are lots of systems that we have, and we want to focus first on getting those to a state where we're really happy with them, and we're fully supporting them. And then we can look into, all right, now that we have those up to a level of quality that we're really happy with and fans are happy with, what other projects can we take on and what things can we look at doing?
We know that the Tengu have been hiding behind the wall, waiting for the time to come out. Can you tell us anything about them, how they experienced the recent disasters, and if we're going to see them peeking behind the door anytime soon?
Whether or not we'll see them soon is certainly not something I can say. I mean, we try and keep the Tengu involved in a lot of the things that we're doing. In terms of the way that the Tengu would experience, any of the recent things, it's going to be very similar to the way they experience a lot of things, which is they've kind of holed themselves up in their city to keep themselves safe. So you'll see them come out every once in a while. They're certainly aware of some of the stuff that's going on, if not necessarily seeing the effects to the same level as everyone else is. That being said, you can definitely keep your eyes open, and I'm sure there will pop up more in the future. But more specifics than that, I can't really give you. I don't know if Matt has anything else.
I can't add much else other than we know that people are excited about the tengu, and you can see their reactions to some of the things that are going on in the world. Typically, those reactions don't have a lot of empathy because they've hidden themselves up behind the wall, and they're not very interested in allowing people to come in and take shelter there. But definitely stay tuned, and it's something that it's a thread that we are intentionally exploring, and so it's part of the overall story of Tyria, and it'll have payouts as we go on.
How happy in general are you with the way the living world allows you to expand the Guild 2 universe? Are you able to do everything you want, or are you walking against things that just cannot be done with the current system?
Yeah, so I'd say in general we've been really happy with Living World, particularly looking at Season 2 versus Season 1. You can see that we've made a lot of strides. We've put some systems in place that help us engage with players who maybe had to take a break because life happened, and now they can come back in and kind of easily re-engage with Living World through the Living World Journal. I would say it's clearly a learning experience for us, and we're still figuring out what kinds of things we can build in Living World, and what kinds of things we need a little bit longer scope or time frame to do. But it's pretty exciting to see some of the epic stuff that we did towards the end of Season 1, and we learned a lot from that, and we learned a lot from the feedback from fans on what kinds of things they like to see, what kinds of things they want to see. We're not there yet. There's obviously a lot that we still have to learn and get better, but that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on as a studio, is the opportunity to iterate on content and figure out how exactly we want to tell these stories and what kinds of stories we can tell in Living World and what kinds of things that we need to do as part of a feature pack. I mean, I don't know that I'd say that we found anything that we just can't do. Sometimes it's a matter of schedule and scope. And obviously there are a lot of things that we're doing as a studio at the same time. And so kind of prioritizing how we do some of that stuff is always a difficult decision. But we try to leave a lot of room for the teams to take on kind of the high-level goals and challenges that are presented by Colin and the directors. And then they can approach solving that problem in a lot of different ways. And so that's, in Season 1, that's partly why you saw so many different types of content coming out. Sometimes it was fractals, sometimes it was reworking a dungeon. And a lot of those things are options for the team to say, hey, this is how we want to approach solving this problem. So there are definitely things that are difficult to do, primarily because of scope and time frame. But I don't know that I'd say we've found anything that we just can't flat out do. I think we found things that it makes more sense to move into feature packs, things that affect kind of the game as a whole, as a big general system, are difficult to do in Living World seasons, and it makes more sense to separate them out into their own kind of delivery.
With the living story, you're also changing the landscape of certain maps and instances. For example, with the Vines of Mordomov. At the same time, you still have people playing their personal story and coming across these changes. Some people worry that this will be emerging breaking. How are you going to combat this, if at all?
So there's kind of two answers to that question. One is that with the release of the Living World Journal, there's more of an established timeline of when things happen. And so you can see very clearly, and we're trying to communicate very clearly, hey, this is the order in which things happen. And if you choose to play those things out of order, then you might see things that there is a little immersion breaking. But we feel like giving you the opportunity to go back and play content is really important. The other side of that is that we have to think about when we're building this content, and we are aware of some of those difficulties and some of the spots where it's going to create kind of, if you're in the open world it looks one way, and when you're playing through an instance it looks a different way. And we went through that evaluation when we destroyed Lion's Arch, and it's an interesting question. I'm not sure that we know exactly where we're going to end up on it, but it is something that we think about a lot, and we try to engage with that question before we decide exactly what we're doing, because we know it's important for us to have a world that feels alive and exciting and lots of things are changing, but it's also important for us to keep the world immersive. And so it's a balance, and I think we'll continue to get better at that as we go along and build things. But definitely an interesting question and a hard one to take on.
Is it possible to use the original associated map for a story step instead of using the altered map?
Yeah, that gets into some of the technical side of it, which I won't really dive into. But there are times when that's possible for us to do, and there are times when it's difficult for us to do. I think what you've seen with Living World Season 2, which is that we're releasing a new space, and that new space is permanent, and there are episodes that are built that go through that map and tell the story of that map, is much more the direction that we're kind of leaning, and the solution that we came up to with that for that problem. So Season 1 had a lot of things that were out in the world, and we were kind of experimenting with like what does this do to immersion and how does this feel, and Season 2 is a little bit more judicious in terms of when it does that kind of stuff. Definitely still want to have that epic feeling and that the world is growing, but we're learning that we can build content in a way that supports both a very rich immersive storytelling experience and also kind of changes the face of Tyria.
Are you able to keep a map for a specific personal story step?
Technically, I think that is possible. That gets into a lot of questions about space and bandwidth and a bunch of other stuff. So there are a lot of factors when we're making decisions like that, and it's kind of a case-by-case basis in terms of whether or not we want to try and do something like that or whether or not we want to not do that. I guess the thing that I'd say is that we try to focus on how are we going to come up with a solution to that problem in the style that we build the content, so that we actually don't have to make that choice. We don't have to say, oh, we're going to do this way or that way, and each of them has downsides, and instead find a way to build content that sidesteps that problem, and just provides content that people can play through without ever experiencing that disconnect.
Will you be updating the older personal storylines to match the changes in the world?
I don't know the answer to that. It's definitely something that we talk about, and we say, hey, if we're going to go into a map that has existing story content, how much debt does that accumulate? And is there a better place for us to do that? Is there a spot on the new map where we can tell that story without having to go back and rework a bunch of the old stuff to match up? That said, what we did with Lion's Arch, we also did a lot of work to make some of the story steps actually make sense within the context of now Lion's Arch is destroyed. So it's possible that we would go back and do that, but it's definitely a question of, given the scope and the time frame that the team has, what do they think is going to be the most effective story and content that they can build?